Hi there, I'm Matt Donnelly and RotoBaller, and I don't even know what to tell you anymore because those zero RB truthers, they must not be sleeping well at night these days as the wide receiver position continues to produce injury after injury, week in and week out. And I'm not just talking about regular old injuries, I'm talking about the top fantasy assets. Week number 8, Stephon Diggs suffered a non-contact knee injury, and Christian Kirk and the Jacksonville Jaguars, his season came to an end with a broken collarbone. If you are part of the RotoBaller Discord channel, you already know that we're ahead of the game here when we talk about starts and sits. Last week it was Cedric Tillman talking about him being a must start. He came out and he absolutely balled out last week. Now I did say sit Calvin Ridley, so I'm eating a little bit of crow there. But hey, nobody was starting pass catches for the Tennessee Titans anyway in the first place, so we're not going to worry about that. So in week 9, which wide receivers can you trust and which ones should fantasy managers look to avoid? Let's break it all down in this week's wide receivers starts and sits for week number 9. And we're going to start with Devontae Smith of the Philadelphia Eagles as they take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. With a 46-yard pitch and catch, have we seen Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts connection get back on track? I don't care who you are. That was a thing of beauty. B-A-U-T-Y, baby. I don't know what was better, the throw or the catch, but either way, it brought a tear to my eye. That throw, it also accounted for half of Smith's receiving total that week, but it is nice to see Smith targeted on 7 occasions, resulting in a score and 85 yards. It was also only the second time this season that Smith eclipsed 20 fantasy points in a game. However, Smith has been one of the more consistent wide receivers, recording 14 or more fantasy points in all but one game this season. This week, Smith, he faces the Jacksonville Jaguars, a secondary that we seem to pick on each and every week, and hey, rightfully so. If you don't like something, change it. The Jaguars, they haven't changed anything. I guess you can change the Tiger stripes, but you can't change their spots. You know what? That's for another show altogether. The Jaguars, they've allowed 9 touchdown receptions to wideouts, 1,417 receiving yards to date. This means that the Jaguars are giving up the 4th most fantasy production to the position. In the last 4 weeks, that number, it has jumped even further as the Jaguars have allowed an average of 42.54 per outing. Smith has had at least 6 receptions and 7 targets in 4 of 6 games this season, and while riding shotgun with A.J. Brown has accounted for 24.7% target share and a 27.8% air yard share. The next wide receiver we're talking about, how about Ladd McConkey of the Los Angeles Chargers? They take on the Cleveland Browns. After posting a 6-catch, 111-yard, 2-touchdown stat line against the New Orleans Saints last week, Ladd McConkey not only cracked the top 40 receiving yards with 376, but that nearly 30-point fantasy performance, that shot him up to 20th amongst the wide receiver position in fantasy. The Justin Herbert-Ladd McConkey connection, it is just starting to heat up, so you can expect Justin Herbert's trust to continue to grow in McConkey, and why wouldn't it? McConkey's already among the elite route runners in the game. He tracks the ball exceptionally well, and he picks up yards after the catch, as 159 of those 376 yards have been a direct result of after the catch yardage. One of my favorite little stats that I picked here when I was looking back at all the potential starts and sits this week was the fantasy points per route run through 7 games of a player's career, going from 2014 to 2024. McConkey's .49 fantasy points per route run trails only Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Marquise Brown, Puka Nacua, Calvin Ridley, Brian Thomas Jr., and Malik Neighbors. Now that's impressive company to mention within the same breath, which by the way, I don't take a whole lot of during these shows. On the season, the Cleveland Browns are allowing 36.13 fantasy points per game, most of which have been the opposing number 1 wide receiver as the beneficiary. With 68.8% of his routes coming from the slot, I would anticipate his first read target share increasing from its current 27%. The third wide receiver you have to start this week, how about Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos as they take on the Baltimore Ravens? You know when you're out there trick-or-treating and you purposely plan your whole trick-or-treating route around the houses that you know are going to have those full-size chocolate bars? Back in August, the Denver Broncos, they were not part of my trick-or-treating route. However, with Bo Nix dressing up and performing like a fantasy superhero, the Denver team is one of those teams that you have to visit for all the best fantasy treats. Last week, Nix, he filled Sutton's bag with targets, targeting the Broncos pass catcher on 11 occasions, resulting in 8 receptions and an even 100 yards on the day. Sutton has earned a first read target share of 29.9% and accounted for 38.5% of the Broncos' air yards. As the Broncos' offense continues to grow, so too will the rapport between Nix and Sutton, leading to even more productive fantasy outings. This week is another building block for that foundation, facing a Ravens team that has allowed 44.66 fantasy points per game this season to wide receivers, and they've also allowed a league-high 13 touchdown receptions, including 2 more last week to my man, Cedric Tillman. Now we're going to talk about those wide receivers that were not starting this week, and we have to start with T. Higgins of the Bengals as they take on the Las Vegas. Last week, T. Higgins, he missed that contest against the Eagles after being a late addition to the injury report with that quad injury, and the Bengals, they certainly missed him. Lower body injuries, though, they are nothing new to Higgins, who has had 5 or more hamstring injuries here in the last 8 seasons, along with a couple ankle injuries, and of course that quadriceps injury last week. Right now, Higgins, like us, is considered day-to-day, but I lean towards him not playing this week once again. This is terrible news for the Bengals, a team that averages 11.3 fewer points per game and 48 fewer passing yards per game with Higgins out of the lineup. Suppose Higgins somehow were to get that Mr. Miyagi wax on, wax off treatment. In that case, this matchup, it is still not a good one. The Raiders feature the 8th stingiest fantasy unit against the wide receiver position, allowing just 28.08 fantasy points. Another wide receiver that I'm seeing this week is Jalen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins as they head to Buffalo to take on the Buffalo Bills. I think the band basically forgot to show up last week. I mean, Tagovailoa, he was back, but Tagovailoa and Jalen Waddle, that connection, it seems to be somewhat delayed. It wasn't like a total buzzkill. Waddle did haul in 4 catches there for 45 yards. But the biggest play, 20 yards? That's not going to cut it, man. We are spoiled by today's day and age of gratification instantly. Think about the latest blockbusters. When they come in, how high our expectations are. Basically, we're asking ourselves to be disappointed. And you know what? Let's blame Tyreek Hill for that. If you don't expect big things from Jalen Waddle this week, then you're probably not going to be disappointed when he performs similarly to how he did last week. If you set that bar too high, you're going to fail to reach it on a consistent basis. But hey, if you set that bar low enough, every once in a while you're going to trip over it and people are going to praise you for your effort. Basically, if you set the bar lower than normal this week against the Bills, a team that is allowing the 6th fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver position, you're going to be much happier. And my last sit of the week, it is my weekly buyer beware, temper your expectations portion of the Starts and Sits show. Truth is, Amon-Ra St. Brown has not been his dominant self. While the Lions receiver has a touchdown in 5 straight contests, he's also failed to register more than 75 receiving yards in 5 of 7 games this season, including a 2-catch, 7-yard performance last week. Then again, he had a touchdown, so people forget about how bad he actually was. Now, the Lions offense was pretty good. It just, no one on the offense was scoring. Weird, right? Now, Detroit, they are averaging 33.3 points per game this season. In the last 4 games, that number's actually jumped to 43 points per game. In those 4 contests, St. Brown has been held under 59 yards in 3 of those 4 games and has seen fewer than 5 targets in 2 of the last 3 games, which is certainly something that we're not going to be too excited to see. St. Brown, he was good last season against the Packers, but he wasn't great. St. Brown, he had 14 catches there in 2 head-to-head matchups and averaged 75.5 receiving yards in those 2 games. Over the last 4 weeks, the Packers, they have allowed just 28.55 fantasy points per game. That is the 10th fewest. Hey, some like it hot, some sweat when the heat is on. You wanted it bold, and I am a man of the people, and I'm here to deliver that. And I'm also going to deliver more weekly advice here on the RotoBaller Discord channel. And if you want to stay up to date on all the latest news and analysis, head over to rotoballer.com, and we'll see you then.